The movie begins in court where Andie Dufresne, a banker in Maine, is facing trial over accusations of the murder of his wife and her lover, a pro golfer. He is being convicted of this incident, yet he knows very well he's innocent. Since all the evidence was pointing to him as the murderer, he is sentenced to 2 life sentences. He's sent to serve his sentence at the harsh and cruel Shawshunk prison. At Shawshunk Prison, Ellis Boyd, commonly known as Red, is an inmate who has served his life sentence for 20 years at the prison. He attends an interview for his parole application, which is rejected. He does not seem hurt by this, showing us that he's used to this. Red is the prison smuggler who can get anything, of course, within reason. As they're walking in the prison, the alarm to notify the arrival of new inmates goes off, alarming arrival of new inmates. Red and his friends bet on which new fish will freak out during his first night. Red places a huge bet on Andie. At night, an oversized man nicknamed Fat S loses his still and sobs in tears, making Haywood the winner. He can't stand his new life in prison. He is beaten up by the guards due to failure of being quiet. It's morning and the inmates show up at the dining hall for breakfast. Andie finds a worm in his meal, making him to dislike it greatly. Haywood is offered his rewards for winning the bets, rolls of cigarettes, which are considered to be a fortune in the prison. Andie tries inquiring about the guy who died at the prison but is immediately shushed by Haywood. While bathing, Andie is approached by an inmate, Boggs, who wishes to be his sexual partner. He walks out of the guy very much annoyed. Red meets Andie at the field for the first time at the prison's compound. It is at that place that their friendship begins. He is introduced to the sisters, a trio consisting of homosexuals. Andie presents an idea to Red of escaping from the Shawshunk prison, which Red considers to be foolish and suicidal since no one has ever made it out alive. He says the rock used in the construction of the prison's walls is quartzite, a loosely packed rock that easily disintegrates upon little pressure. Knowing Red as the prison smuggler, he requests him to smuggle him a rock hammer which he would use to tunnel through the prison's walls. This makes Red to even consider the plan to be more foolish. Red does his behind the scenes and he surely gets the rock hammer. He finally gets the joke that with such a tool it would take a man about 600 years to tunnel through the walls. He delivers Andie's order to him using a book. Andie is tricked into the back room of the laundry hall. There he finds the sisters waiting for him. The sisters want to defile him, but Andie won't give in easily. He delivers a good fight. The scenes after can't tell whether they succeeded or not. Andie does not disclose his assaulters, but the whole prison knows them. From there on, assault by the sisters becomes a routine. At times he manages to fight them off, but at times his efforts fail him. His first 2 years in the prison became a serious nightmare. Warden Norton offers the inmates an opportunity for an outdoor renovation of a building in the prison. A dozen volunteers are required for the job, and with it are certain privileges. During the job, Andie overhears the chief guard talk with his fellow guards. The chief guard, Hardley, is worried of paying taxes for an upcoming inheritance. Andie suggests that he offers his $35,000 to his wife as a gift, protecting it from IRS. This would enable Hardley to evade taxation since it's legal up to $60,000. Andie offers to do it for him in exchange of 3 bottles of beer apiece for each of his co-worker. At first Hardley threatens to throw Andie off the roof, but finally agrees, and on the last day of the tarring job he offers them bottles of ice-cold beers as agreed. Andie sits aside feeling normal again. Red remarks on how Andie must have invented a way to find favor in the eyes of the guards. While watching a movie, Andie requests for a large poster of Rita Hayworth. He leaves the hall only to be pounced on by the sisters, who are patiently waiting for him outside. They drag him to a nearby room with a plan to defile him. Andie knocks 2 of the sisters with a huge metallic disc but is quickly held down on the ground. Boggs gets out a sharp object and threatens Andie to use it on him if he fails to swallow the snake inside his pants. Andie keeps his cool and uses only words to piss off Boggs. He annoys him, making him to beat him up, buying him a ticket for a stay at the prison's infirmary for a month. Boggs is taken to solitary detention for his inhuman act. Boggs finds Hardley and other guards in his cell once he's out from detention. They mercilessly beat him up, crippling him. Since then, 2 incidents have never happened again. The sisters never laid a finger on Andie and Boggs never walked again. Boggs is transferred to a minimum security prison upstate. It's believed that Boggs lived up all the rest of his days drinking his food through a straw. Andie is finally released from the infirmary and he finds rocks and a poster of Rita Hayworth as presents from his friends as a welcome back gift. The prison's warden is impressed with Andie when he gets to know how Andie's finance IQ helped Hartley. He plans an abrupt cell inspection to level up Andie. He lets Andie keep Rita Hayworth as an exception though not allowed. He reassigns Andie to the prison's library to help Brooke, an elderly inmate at the prison. He wants Andie to help with the financial matters of the prison guards, other prison's guards including his, despite not telling him. There Andie comes up with a plan to expand the library. Andie plans to write letters to Maine's legislature requesting for funds on a weekly basis. During April, Andie does the tax returns for half of the prison's guards. The following year Andie does them all including the wardens. Year after that, the start of the intramural season is rescheduled to coincide with the tax season. This enabled Andie to even do the tax returns of the incoming team. He got very busy that he was allowed one staff, Red, saving him from the woodworking duty. Though being very busy, Andie never forgot to write his letters. At one time they find Brooks threatening to kill Haywood since he was being paroled against his wishes after living in the prison for 50 years. The confinement in the prison has made this place to be his home, an impossible place to leave. Andie manages to persuade him to let Haywood free. After all, Brooks is paroled despite his wish to continue staying in the prison. Beyond the walls of the prison, Brooks is astonished with the quick revolutionary development of the outside world. He left only one car in the streets, but now there are a bunch of them all over. Brooks finds life outside prison unbearable and finally commits suicide. It has been 6 years since Andie began to write letters to Maine's legislature and finally he receives a fund of $200 and a bunch of books and records. This motivates Andie to double up his efforts, though the legislature did this thinking he would stop writing the letters. From there henceforth, he writes 2 letters a week. He comes across a copy of Morzett's The Marriage of Figaro in the records. He locks the warden's office guard in the bathroom and plays the record over an excerpt through the prison's PA system. Every prisoner is captivated by the music and stops whatever they were doing. Red remarks that the voices of the 2 Italian ladies soared higher and further than everybody in A Great Place Dares to Dream, and for once every inmate at Shawshunk felt free. This act of defiance by Andie pissed of the warden. Andie raises the volume up when asked to turn it off. The warden asks Hartley to break into the office after seeing there's no stopping Andie. He gets a 2-week detention as punishment. After the end of his detention, Andie tells his inmates that those were the easiest times he ever did, which they totally disagree. According to him, hope can sustain a man, while Red greatly dismisses Andie's belief. Red once again attends an interview for his parole and as usual gets rejected. Andie kept on writing the 2 letters every week as he promised, and at the end of the year, he started receiving an annual payment of $500. He made deals with book clubs, charity books. Andie transforms the Shawshunk Prison Library into the best prison library in New England, complete with fine selection of Hank Williams. This was the same year Warden Norton instituted his Inside Out program. He intended to assign the inmates different tasks in the community known as community service at a bare minimum expense. Andie, with his finance tactics, becomes the warden's secretary, handling his financial activities. This move helps the warden to get almost every contract in the town and only leaves to others if bribed. Andie launders the warden's money by setting up many accounts in different banks and with several investments such as stocks using a fake identity, Randall Stevens. This move will lead the police to a dead end in case they investigate on the black money, since he is a fictional character created by Andie. Andie tells this info to Red and sarcastically says that he only became a criminal once in prison. A new prisoner, Tommy, is transferred to the prison for theft. During mealtime, Andie advises Tommy to settle on another hustle besides theft, which leaves him in a deep thought. This makes him to become friends with Red and Andie quickly. He approaches Andie and requests him to help him acquire his high school equivalency diploma. Tommy gets frustrated while taking his exam and tosses the exam papers into the dustbin. Andie instead picks it up and delivers it for marking. The test score turns out to be a success. Red tells Tommy about Andie's case, which leaves him in a shock due to the resemblance with the case of his cellmate. He reveals about his cellmate named Elmo Blatch from another prison who boasted about killing a man who was a pro golfer at the country club he worked at together with his female lover. The woman's husband, who was a banker, was convicted of the murders and sent to prison. This info shocked Andie, as it was exactly similar to his case. He quickly approaches Norton to help him get another trial due to the emergence of a witness. Norton brushes off the story, claiming that it was just a fantasy created by Tommy to pass his time in the prison. In the middle of the talk, Andie mentions about not telling on his money laundering activities. This annoys Norton and sends him to solitary detention for a month. Warden Norton meets up with Tommy at night alone. He questions Tommy if he would testify about Andie's innocence before a court of law, which he agrees 100%. The warden kills him by asking Hardley to shoot him. He later informs Andie that Tommy died while attempting to escape, which Andie knows very well that he's lying. He tells him that he will no longer have the guards' protection together with the now transformed library. Andie comes out from the detention and meets up with Red. Andie tells Red that though he didn't physically kill his wife, he still led to the death of his wife by driving her away. He says that if he's freed or ever escapes, he would like to go to Zihuatanejo, a beach town on the Pacific coast of Mexico. He also narrates to Red how he got engaged to his wife. He and his late wife went up to a farm in Buxton, Maine, to a large oak tree at the end of a stone wall. The two made love under the tree, and afterwards he proposed to her. He asks Red that if he's ever freed to locate that field and the oak tree. He wants him to have a box that is beneath the tree that Andie kept there. At lunch, Red tells his friends how worried he is of Andie after their talk. Later in the evening, Norton asks Andie to shine his shoes and take his clothes to the laundry. Andie orders for a rope from Haywood, making him to think that Andie wants to commit suicide. Red had a very tough night, thinking that Andie would put an end to his suffering. The following day, they fail to find Andie during the usual morning roll call. Norton finds Andie's shoes in the box instead of his, making him furious. The situation worsens when he finds out that Andie is missing. Red is questioned if Andie ever told him anything. He becomes furious and throws Andie's sculptures all over the cell. He is shocked when one of the rocks hit the large poster on the wall and goes through it. He inserts his finger through the hole on the poster and his entire hand goes in, revealing a large tunnel behind the poster equal to a man's size. He initiates a manhunt for Andie, which leads to a nearby sewage pool where they find the rock hammer he used to tunnel through the prison. Red is proved wrong when Andie takes less than 20 years to tunnel through the walls, which he thought would take 600 years. Andie used to dig through the prison's walls at night. He would get rid of the sand and rocks by placing them in his pockets and empty them while strolling around in the prison's compound. He uses the rope to tie his belongings onto his leg and goes through the tunnel. He comes out at the prison's sewage system. He hits the big pipe by timing the thunder outside to ensure he's not heard by anyone. On that night, Andie crawled to freedom through the pipe that carried the entire prison shit, which was 500 yards long. Red can't imagine whatever Andie went through in the pipe. He comes out of the pipe at a nearby pool. The next day, Andie shows up in the Maine's National Bank, acting as the fictional identity he made, Randall Stevens. He walks out of the banks with Warden Norton's cash amounting to over $370,000. He asks the cashier to mail him a package to Maine's security officers. Not long after, the police show up at Shawshunk prison. Norton watches through the window when Hardley is being arrested. He decides that he won't go to prison and takes the matter on his hands. He drives a bullet through his head, leading to his death. Not long afterwards, Red receives a postcard from Port Hancock, which Red takes it as a sign that that was the border that Andie passed through to get into Mexico. The following year, Red attends an interview for his parole. This time, the normal turns to abnormal. His parole is approved after saying that he doesn't understand the meaning of rehabilitation and it was a word created by man. As every other paroled prisoner, he is offered a room to live in and a job at the grocery store. He goes to the field where Andie asked him to go. He finds the mystery box and inside it a letter and some cash. In the letter, Andie wants Red to join him to help him with his project. Once again, he reminds Red that hope is a good thing, for it can save a drowning man. Red leaves his house despite being restricted to, for no one would look for a crooked man like him, and heads to Andie, bringing us to the end of the movie.